Hello, this is Pastor Scott Cruz at the Deeper Rock, and this is the first of a 4-part series called My Money Pledge. A lot of people, they don't like hearing a lot about money in church. In a lot of cases, I don't blame them, and I don't even disagree with them at all. I've seen televangelists embarrass themselves by telling little old ladies to send their money into them. I've seen self-serving prosperity preachers make promises that if you give today in this special offering, God spoke to me this morning, and if you give right now today, God is going to bring your blessing. I remember when I was a young guy, 17 years old, and I was sitting in a service, and it was a mission service. Now, I'm not going to tell you who they're raising money for, but just so you know, I've given money to them in the past, and so I'm not disagreeing with the cause that they were doing. But what they did is they had an evangelist preach an hour message, stirring everybody up to give. Very dynamic, charismatic, and then they had hung on the walls posters all along the edges, and they gave an altar call. Who here is going to give? And I was already starting to feel uncomfortable with the way that they were doing this altar call. And everybody stood up that were going to give, and then they were instructed to walk to the walls. And on the walls there were posters of amounts of money that you could give, ranging from $20 all the way up to like $5,000. Now, I was irritated because I thought that they were being pushy about it. Now, just so you know, 17, I've been working an actual job since I was about 12 or 13, and I had always tithed. I've never gotten a paycheck and not tithed on it that I know of, that I can remember. I'm not saying it's impossible that I didn't miss one along the way in so many years, but from my very first paycheck, I've always been a giver. I've always tithed. It's always been so it was not that I was offended by the idea of giving, but it was the way they're doing it. So I sat in my seat, and we had everybody get up and walk to the walls and lay their hands on a poster that they were claiming, and that was the amount that they were going to give. And then went on to make the people feel like dirt that were still sitting down. And I was still sitting down. And so they finally came, and I got up and I went over to the wall because I was embarrassed, because he was making everybody feel embarrassed. It was still there. And when I got to the wall, all of the $20 posters were gone. All that was left was like $100 and up to $5,000, and I didn't have $100, you know. I was, 17 and just didn't have that kind of money. And so I went back and I sat down again, and I was so offended. Now, if you've been hanging around me, you maybe heard me say the phrase, the ends justify the means, almost all the time. And you could make a case that if there is a good cause, that you should do whatever means necessary to fund that cause. But I don't think that's the right way to do it. The ends justify the means. Another time I was leading worship at a camp meeting, and they were an audience of about 100 people, and they told this 100 people, we have a tax bill that we didn't know about it, we need to raise $8,000. They took offering after offering in that service until they finally got $8,000. Then a month later, they sent out a newsletter and they raised the entire $8,000 out of this 100 people. So that's an average of $800 a person, of which I was one and didn't give anything. So there, and so then they sent out a newsletter a month later saying, we need $8,000 for this tax bill that we got. Well, they lacked ethics in that. And so this is what people do. There's been a lot of bad behavior in the church in the area of finances. And I inherit that prejudice. When someone comes into our church and they hear me talk about money, they immediately think that I'm one of those guys. And so that's where my 3-part money pledge comes in, because I can't not talk about it. 3 out of every 4 parables that Jesus talked about had to do with possessions or money. 1 of every 10 verses in the Gospels has to do with money. 2,300 verses in the Scripture, 5 times as many as prayer and faith, have to do with money. So I cannot, with integrity, claim that I preach the gospel and preach the Scripture if I never approach the topic of money. But because there are other people that I think are jerks, that I think are idiots, that give me a bad reputation even though I've never done those things, I have a 3-part pledge for the Rock. when it comes to the area of finances. And that pledge is this. Number one, I will not use emotion to manipulate you to get you to give. If you come to the rock, I'm just not going to do that. Number two, I will not lead where I won't go. I'm not going to tell you to do anything without being transparent about it and showing you how it has looked in my life and inspiring the two of us to do better. And number three, I will not rob you of God's blessing in your life by not talking about money, because He intends it in His Word, and His Word is so full of good stuff. So, I will not use emotion to manipulate you, I will not lead where I will not go, and I will not rob you of God's best for your life by not talking about this that He spent so much of His Scripture talking about. May the Lord richly bless you, and I hope to see you in church on Sunday.